Okay.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. We're very excited. This is a special meeting. We have a special guest. Let's all take a great posture. Your best posture of the day, your Black Panther, Superman, Wonder Woman posture. Make it an extremely good posture and then relax it so it's not rigid, and breathe. And remember your mission in your life and why you're at this meeting, and give it away. So today I'm honored to finally meet. We really have only loosely connected. You sent me a handwritten or sent Elephant a handwritten card a few years ago, which was very sweet. And I'm very slow. People know I'm very slow. So it took me a while to kind of really connect. But Tyler, it's a real honor to have you here and a real pleasure.
Well, the honor's mine. I appreciate this. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I've known you, as I think most people, through your work, your poetry. So maybe can you just bring us back? I'm sure you've talked about this 1,000 times, but if you don't mind being patient with me, like how did all this career as a writer begin?
Sure. That's a question I ask myself every day. I think I'm still a little bit baffled that any of it ever happened.
Love that.
I just started writing, honestly, as a way to kind of pressure release all of the noise that's always been in my brain. I'm somewhere on the spectrum, and I think it's what we used to be called Asperger's. And so growing up, my time through elementary, middle, and high school, it was rough. And I think that was before, especially in Montana, that was before people really got it. And so my time going through school, really the only way I survived it was through writing, and honestly, just through writing for myself. I would never have like the textbook or the right materials for each class. And so the way I got through with it, I would borrow a pencil and a paper, and I would just write poetry for myself, really as a way to just clear out that noise. And that's where it stayed for years, honestly. And I think it didn't even really graduate past that until like blogging became a thing sometime in 2003. And even then, though, it was kind of just more of a way for me to share stuff with my family and my friends that I knew actually were paying attention. And so I never expected anybody.
So back in 2003, how were you sharing it with people?
So right when Blogspot first started being a thing, I had a little blog spot, and just my friends and family who had the address would just check in from time to time. That was it. I mean, it was never anything beyond that. And once social media started jumping into the world, still at that point, I really didn't have any plans on sharing it. It was just something I did every day just to calm myself down. And then I had some other friends and family that were like, well, maybe try sharing it on the Instagram or on Facebook. And I was like, no one's going to want to read this crap. And so I did it. And that was the snowball that, kind of started down the mountain.
So I think I've lost your video. If you can turn it off and on.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that snowball, because, probably most people in this conversation would feel like, well, if we put our stuff out there. Tyler, can you still hear me?
I can hear you great, yeah.
Okay, great. I just lost your video, so maybe keep toggling around, but it could just be Wi-Fi.
All right, is it working now?
I can hear you perfectly, but
okay.
Other people are seeing you, so we're good. We'll just
great.
Right now, you just have an Atari symbol over your camera, so
that's probably better, anyways.
Yeah, right. Atari is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. So, yeah, I think most of us would feel like if we put our haiku or poetry out there, then what? Like maybe 80 people, if we're talking Instagram likes, maybe 80 people like it, maybe 20 people like it. But what then? How did you kind of connect the dots? I mean, you have best-selling books, right? Nationally best-selling poetry books. Like we all love, we all love to complain about Instagram. I know I do, but poetry, and you're one of the leading examples of that in the whole world, has undergone a renaissance of actually being practical, that something people want to read and want to buy and support. Not just like a dying craft through Instagram partially and Tumblr and.
Yeah, honestly, that's been such a shock to me. To address the first part of your question,
Yeah.
I never connected those dots. I am probably the worst business person, worst self-marketer. I'm just rubbish at all of it. And what really helped at the very beginning and what kind of pushed that snowball down the hill was a few different celebrities caught wind of some of the things that I was saying, and then they would share it, and then people that followed them would share it. And it really was one of those strange games of telephone where it just got passed around. And that was years ago. And that's kind of what got it at least noticed. And honestly, I think I attribute all of the success past that just for staying consistent and I just am relentlessly, everything I write, I share. And I think that level of transparency, I think that's what translates across, and that's what lets people know that it's coming from a genuine place. And when you boil it all down, I think that really is where it is poetry was dying for a very long time because I think that there are gatekeepers to the poetry community that have this misguided belief that in order to be worthy, it has to be some level of, you can't understand it. And to me, I think it is infinitely harder to take a complex thing and make it simple than it is to go the other way around. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with writing something that people look at and they say, it's a punch to the gut where they think, oh my God, I've felt that too. I know exactly what that feels like. Mm-hmm. That to me is harder than it is to take words that sound beautiful together and make some really obscure sentence that really the meaning is indistinguishable from, just anything else, like gibberish. Mm-hmm. So
I love that. I'm editor-in-chief at Elephant, so we have one rule about poetry on Elephant, which you would love, which you basically just said for the last however many years, which is it has to be accessible. I don't want any poetry on our site where people look at it and they're like, it's beautiful. Maybe it's profound. I really have no idea what it's saying.
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets really easy, especially with poetry, to hide behind obscurity and then kind of label it as profound. When really, who's to say if it is? Because like I said, I think the most profound truths I've ever heard are the ones that feel like someone socked me right in the stomach. And I think that is exactly it. I've felt that. I know what that is. Somebody else just said something that I thought I was the only one. To me, that's profound. And if you wanted, I could write 10 poems today that you look at and you say, I have no clue what that means. I have absolutely no idea. And I could do that, but why? I don't understand why an art form needs to be elevated in order to be worthy. I think, there's something to say about accessibility.
Yeah, I'm in Halifax right now visiting my mom, and I'm about a block away from two statues, one of Walter Scott, who I barely know about. I just read his plaque with Melissa, and one of Robert Burns, who I do know very well. And both of them were for being kind of poets of the people and, glorifying or exhorting the common man, the farmer, not talk, and the peasant, not talking some sort of high-minded, elevated thing. And I think there's a place for art that's high, that's low, that's everywhere. Shakespeare did all of it. So I think sometimes it gets too, like, it can only be one level.
Yes.
I think it can be high, and maybe some poetry can have multiple meanings. Sure. But what you're talking about is what Naropa University, which you may know about, Trungpa Rinpoche, the Buddhist teacher, and what we try to teach in our writing section of the academy, which is over. But we call it catharsis, which is you write your genuine experience. Yes. And then the alchemy happens. Someone reads it and does exactly what you said. And it's like, I went through that too. And then you don't feel so alone, and your struggle transforms into kind of joy in a funny way.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting too. I totally agree with your point that, when I look back, you're talking about Burns and Walter Scott. And then even to go back further than that, I think some of my favorite history that I've ever read is the idea that years and years and years ago, when like court jesters, part of their job was to entertain the court. And it's really interesting to read stories about that, when they were in court and they were entertaining, they would use very high-minded words, and they like even the rhyme schemes that they used, like they use rhyme royale and all these different old rhyming schemes, and it was literally to seem elevated. But my favorite stories were then when they would leave and when they would just be with themselves and back with the people, they would get into these almost like what we would see today as rap battles. They would get into these really funny contests with each other where they were saying things that were super accessible and hilarious and some of probably their best work. That's, to me, that's where I would want to be with poetry. I would want to be, you know, in those pubs slinging those insults at each other poetically rather than having to come up with these things that meet some ideal.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I'd add to that, I love the Corchester is sort of my idol. You know, it's the sort of Jon Stewart role. I'm dating myself a little bit, but you know, he's still who I respect the most in terms of doing it with dignity, doing it with friendliness and respect and morals. But by doing it, I mean speaking truth to power. And Jester's also, I hope, had a reputation that was deserved of being the only one who could talk to the dumb king without getting his head off. And
exactly.
You know, I love the beat poets. Maybe you do. You know, there's a long tradition of art as activism, art not as navel gazing, just about me and my experience, but about, you know, railing against the powers that be as well.
Yep, the outward projection. I think that's huge.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just like you said, instead of just navel gazing, if the things that you're saying can make people who come from a completely different walk of life, a completely different geographic slice of the planet, if you can write something that makes those people feel less alone, despite the fact that their life could not be even different than you, that outward projection, I think that's where that's the power of poetry, and that's the power it should hold. I think for a long time, I think poetry became a very, I don't know, a divisive device where it was that high-mindedness and that lofty language. It separated people. I think if we can shift that and we can make it something that unifies people all across the world, what better can you do, you know?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's funny because old poetry like Homer or whatever, they were just stories. That's all they were. They were just telling stories. And then at some point it became, how can I hide 5 meanings within this one word that maybe my friends in grad school will kind of half get or think they get, you know?
Sure. Well, I always wonder too, how many of those things are just completely fabricated by the people reading it? Because I see that on a daily basis. Sometimes I'll write something that I think is so straightforward, and then people will write and they'll be like, oh, I think this is about this, that, and this. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, no, actually, that was about a flock of birds that flew over last night, and I thought it was beautiful. It's, you know, it had nothing to do with my soul or anything like that. That time, literally, it was a flock of birds. And I think that happens a lot because for so long, I don't know, simple things were hidden and obscured for no reason.
Yeah. Well, so I think you studied Zen, is that right?
What's that?
Do you study some sort of meditation or Zen or?
Yeah, I've followed Buddhism, mostly Tibetan Buddhism, since I was about 12.
So in the Zen tradition, and we studied a fair amount of it in my particular Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they say, you know, first the mountain is a mountain, then the mountain isn't a mountain, then the mountain is a mountain again. Those are the three stages of the path. And I think that applies to kind of what you're saying with poetry, which is,
oh, for sure.
First, we're solid and we're full of ourselves. We think everything's solid and real, and we take everything too seriously. The mountain is mountain. Then we wake up a bit. We realize the mountain's not solid. It's interdependent. It's part of all things. And we're like, wow, damn. But that's still not totally there. And then when we fully wake up, you know, chop wood, carry water. That's it. The mountain is a mountain. It is what it is. Yeah. It's ordinary.
Absolutely.
And I think you do that with I think that's perhaps the highest truth. Speaking of high, you know, elevated truth is it is what it is.
Well, and that's quite a compliment if I'm even anywhere near there. So thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So I guess maybe let me talk about that since you just manifested it, which is so a lot of us I just did a podcast on this about theism, which
Okay.
is a Buddhist notion of sort of celebrity, which is everywhere in our current world, our influencer culture.
Yeah.
In Elephant Academy, you know, again, the mountain is a mountain. It's not a mountain. It's mountain again. We're not afraid of influencing. We want people to influence this world for the better, for the kinder. But how do you not get high on your own supply? How do you stay humble in a genuine way?
That's a great question. I think that can go a few ways for me. First of all, I kind of feel like I have a built-in cheat mechanism. Wherever I do fall on the spectrum, one of the ways that manifests itself with me is just, and this is the honest truth, a total lack of self-image. I am so beyond clueless about how people perceive me. I mean, even, this is going to sound weird, but I mean, I even avoid mirrors. I don't like looking at myself in the mirror. I don't like looking myself in the eyes, which, I mean, eye contact is a big part of it. But so I just have I do feel like I'm cheating a little bit in that way, because I've never thought of myself in any capacity, let alone a celebrity capacity or anything like that. I just think I think I'm just a huge idiot that's just trying to figure it out every day, honestly. Yeah. And so that's never even been a challenge for me. I mean, you always hear, you know, things like, oh, don't forget the little people when you get bigger, or, oh, you know, don't forget your roots, or
right.
I've never even had an inkling of that. And I don't know if part of it is that, you know, that built-in cheat, or maybe living in Montana, nobody cares here. I mean, nobody even knows what I do here. You know, I see people and they're like, oh, how's your mom? Is she still building houses? You know, and no one knows, no one cares. And I think that's, go ahead.
Let me ask it in a different way then. How would you advise us, all of us in this group in Elephant Academy, when, you know, hopefully all of us, maybe we don't want success in an external way, but we want to be able to make a living doing what we love doing. How do we, you know, not get stuck on taking our success or lack of success too seriously?
Sure. I think honestly, my best advice for there is to just part of my mindfulness is taking myself out of the equation, and it is that outward projection. And I think, like I said earlier, what people want more than anything is that truth, and they want to feel understood. And so if your aim and your goal and your redefinition of success is how you affect others and is the positive effect on others, people gravitate towards that. And especially in an artistic field, I think that the more truth of that truth that's in your work, the more people are going to relate to it. And the more people that are going to relate to it, the more success, I guess, inherently is going to be built into that. And I've definitely seen that when I started doing my typewriter series. And I'm not like tooting my own horn here or anything, just speaking factually. When I started posting my typewriter series on Instagram, if anybody else anywhere in the world was doing that, posting poetry on Instagram, especially in the medium I was delivering it, I don't know about it. And now I look, and there are millions of these poetry accounts that visually look similar to what I'm doing. And I love that. But also what I've seen is there's almost like a bell curve that goes to it, where they start out really strong and they're posting and they're posting and they're posting, and then they peak and they get a few followers. Every single one of them I've seen then starts falling off and falling off and falling off. And then that, before I know it, even if they were really, really talented, they're gone. And I think it's because maybe that wasn't their truth, and maybe that wasn't them being genuine. It was chasing fame or chasing success or chasing anything like that. And that's not sustainable. It's just not. And so that would be my advice, is redefine success as how it affects the people positively that are supporting you, whether that's financially or whatever.
Yeah. So we talk about, I mean, that's a natural segue to something you're well known for, which is consistency, which is a part of craft. We talk about what I call the 3 C's, but I think only one of them is a C. Consistency, quality, and mission. I think I'm going to call the third one mission. You know, if you don't show up consistently, you're not really connecting with community, and you're, like you said, your motivation is somehow a little off. Like maybe you're motivated by followers or career, but it's not, if you're genuinely inspired, if it's part of your practice, you'll do it forever, whether any 5 people are following or 5 million, right?
Exactly. And that's what I have been doing. Like I told you, I started with a blog where I think I had 7 followers and they were all family members.
Right.
And I would still be doing this. If Instagram vanished tomorrow, I would still wake up. I would still write it. I would still type it. I would do the same thing. And that's people see that and they see through that. And there's such a tangible difference. And I will never name names about people who are going the other way with it, but there are very successful people that are writing poetry on Instagram right now that they're doing it for the success and for the followers and for the fame. And I think if you gave everybody a lie detector test, everybody would agree the things that they are saying, you might as well be putting it into an algorithm. You know what I mean? You might as well have a program that takes keywords that are trending at the time, regurgitates them, puts them on a nice background. Boom, there's your poetry.
Give me one right now.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
No. I don't mean a name. I mean let's make up a poem right now. I'll help if you want.
Okay, yeah.
Keywords.
Well, I mean, honestly, like I've said before, if I was smart and if success was my aim, every one of my poems would be under 2 sentences, and they would either be about sex or they would be about being sad and lonely. Every one of them. And that's
okay. Let's make up a poem. So,
okay.
Alone, the moon cuts me like a knife. I think of her stomach, her sex.
That would honestly, you post that and you do it on a nice white background, 4 million likes. You'd have you know what I mean?
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I've seen like 1 sentence poems, and that's what's so frustrating as a writer is, and to each their own. Everybody likes what everybody likes, and that's fine. And we just had a conversation about accessibility, but
sure,
I think there's a difference between accessibility and somebody just said keyword poetry.
Yeah,
there's a huge difference between that. I mean, there's a huge difference. And I don't know, you throw the right amount of keywords in and you say wild or you say sex or you say skin and out pops a poem, and then next thing you know, you have a book deal. And that's not the track I want to be on.
I think you made a good point. I like to be mean once in a while, but you're very nice about it. The point is not to judge, like, that's not poetry, that's bad. But it's that a bunch of people, we've talked a lot about cliche here. Cliche actually doesn't connect with readers. It kind of, and they've done actually studies on this, like nothing really happens to the mind or let alone the heart when you have cliche, moon, sex, blah, blah, blah. So accessibility isn't that. Accessibility isn't big words that are repeated all the time. Accessibility is that catharsis. It's being simple and genuine. And maybe you keep the reader in mind, like you're connecting a little bit or not.
For me, no. I should probably more. And like if if my book publishers were on the call, they'd be like, hey, why don't you maybe go like 3 weeks just posting short poems? Because I mean, if I was smart, I wouldn't post longer form poetry because especially on a medium like Instagram, people are so scroll happy. They just flip and they flip and they flip and they flip. And when you see a big chunk of text, most people are just going to go right past it. And there's a quantifiable difference between when I post something shorter and when I post something longer. So I'm actually really...
The shorter does better?
Oh, every time. Every time. Like probably tenfold, honestly.
Wow.
But that's not why I write. Some days I have a short thought, and the thing that I always do though is when I'm writing, the things that I write always feel like a kick to my guts. And often the challenge that I do is I try to get that gut kick feeling with as small of amount of words as possible, because I think that's the hardest thing. That's the hardest challenge for me is to take something, make it feel like a punch to my stomach, but do it without taking up a whole page. To do that in 4 sentences is so much harder than doing that into a long form poem. But it is interesting because the short ones, I don't know if it's attention spans or what it is, but they do better as far as, better using the metric of likes and shares and all of that.
Yeah. And I think, the world gets warped by the metrics we use to look at what success is. Your most loyal readers, maybe the ones who buy your books, may connect more deeply with the longer ones and the short ones. I don't think it's either or.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about the business for a second, since you mentioned your publishers. I can't see you again, but I'm sure you'll come back. Just
I don't know if other people can.
I think most people can see you. So
okay.
So I published my first book a couple years ago, and I used to work in publishing, and I am an environmentalist. I was not really happy with the choices I had from an environmental point of view, but also from a financial point of view. I'm curious, why do you work with publishers instead of, because you have your own following right now, why have you thought about sort of what's derogatorily called self-publishing, which I like to call independent publishing?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've thought about both. I mean, to be the most blunt and the most honest I can, when I started, I wasn't expecting absolutely anything. And I live in Montana. I had no experience with publishing, self-publishing, anything. I had no experience. I never expected anything to happen. And enough balls kind of got rolling that I started getting emails from, agents and things like this. And some people thought it would be a good idea to try for a book. And I had no idea. And so I said, yeah, I don't know what we're doing, but it sounds cool.
Right.
And, a few feelers were put out and a little bit of a bidding war ensued. And I ended up going with Penguin Random House. They were just Penguin at the time, and one of their imprints, just because honestly, I always loved the books that Penguin put out. And there's just something that felt classic about Penguin. And so I actually think I ended up taking less money to go with Penguin at the very beginning, based just on the fact that I loved the things that they had published over their history. And and thank you. And
when you work with a publisher, you're working with a family.
You really are. And that's been abundantly clear over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, they do feel like family now. And I mean, anytime good things or bad things happen, I can reach out to them and they reach out to me. And I think that's pretty special. And so I have thought about self-publishing before. It's so hard. I mean, this is a weird segue into this, but changes with social media and the way that it's run have made it really difficult for independent artists. And I mean, I have a publisher, and I feel there's a huge difference from when my first book came out, even to now, on who sees what, who knows. I mean, I got an email yesterday and someone said, I had no idea that you had a fourth book that just came out. I didn't know until I walked past it in Target. And I've spoken about that book and shared it probably 30 times since it came out, and nobody knows. And
so you're talking about,
I don't know,
like, are you talking about Instagram mainly right now?
Yeah. And that's
so the algorithm there, the change.
Yeah. And just, yep. I feel like there's a locked gate. I feel like if you think about artists now as like let's say a concert, just to use a metaphor that's easy. We are artists that are giving a concert, and we're setting up our stage and we're waiting for the concert. And we know, like for example, there's 360,000 people that signed up to be told about this concert. And I'm in there and I'm working my butt off and I'm setting up the stage. And a week before the concert, the public or whoever, the promoters have only told 1,000 people that there's a show. Yeah. And then they come into the green room and they say, hey, do you want us to tell 5,000 people? Well, pay us $1,000. Do you want us to tell 20,000 people? That's going to be 10 grand. And these are people that have already agreed. They already want to come to the show. And there's just this barrier set up between us and the people who care about what we're doing, that I get that Instagram is a company. They want to make money. They're entitled to make that money, but something's got to give, because people, I mean, I'm sure you're experiencing this. We spent years trying to develop trust and community with these people that have chosen to take time out of their lives to participate in the things that we're creating. And now we're not being given access to that. despite the fact that we help grow that market and grow that community. And I mean, personally, if Instagram came out with a plan that was $10 a month and I could pay $10 a month, and because of that, they would open the gates to the people who have chosen to follow me, I would do it, because I'm happy to give money to this company that has honestly facilitated a career. And then if people don't want to, they can have the free service. And let's say, maybe the people who have 400 followers and they're just actively following other people, maybe their posts don't need to be seen by everybody. So to them, that would be all right. But for people who built businesses and built careers with these people, now these people aren't able to support us anymore. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a sad state of affairs, kind of.
Well, I have bad news for you, which is it'll only get worse, and you probably know that. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm 100% confident in that, and I'd love to be wrong, but is, I've been doing very much like you. I started Elephant as a print magazine in 2002, and it went national, and then we went online in 2008. So about the same span of time, we've been doing our very different paths. And we built up 8 million fans on Facebook on 60 pages. And we used to be at 23 million readers a month, uniques. Wow. Now we're at 3 million. That's
good Lord.
That's the change from Facebook. Facebook obviously bought Instagram. What's one of the first things they did on Instagram? They instituted the algorithm.
The dreaded algorithm.
Yeah. And so unless Facebook, Zuckerberg himself goes to Esalen and has a life-changing experience and decides to, whatever, like the end of Mad Men. I don't see that they're in it. So, the advice right now, we're in the social media portion of the Academy. We just did our last session. What did we talk about? Oh, Joe already nailed it. So we do basically an entire session on the least sexy thing in social media, which is not even social media, which is the newsletter. The newsletter is the one thing you own, the one thing you control, the one thing not everyone's going to open it, of course, but the one thing you can't really,
gatekeep.
lose. Yeah. It's not. So again, you have more gatekeepers. So yeah, it's tough stuff. And the other thing we obviously talk about is diversification. If don't do too many things, you want to keep it simple, you want to do your craft, but maybe you have a newsletter, maybe you have Instagram, maybe you have whatever else, Twitter, Facebook. So how do you, from just a career point of view, think about, maybe you don't even think about it, but how do you think about sort of the security of your career?
I don't really think about it. Obviously there's times where, you get bills in the mail and you start to panic a little bit and you're like, how sustainable is this? Right. But again, the strange kind of conundrum that I'm in is that I never intended on this being a career. And I would, like I just said before, I would still be doing this even if everything went away. Mm. It's just an interesting thing, though. It's a blessing and a curse to have your hobby and your passion be something that then ends up giving you a career, because those things become married in a funny way, and you kind of have to care. But I don't know. I kind of just don't know what's going to happen, and it doesn't really worry me. It kind of excites me, because it's all like you're just saying, the mountain is a mountain, then it's not a mountain, then it's a mountain again. It's a weird, funny thing. I almost wonder if we're going to end up all going back to blogs again, because we can control that. And you can't police and you can't gatekeep how many people visit your website on a daily basis. And I remember the conversation. I had a friend he worked for Facebook. He was one of the first 15 people, and then he left. And for years he was saying, hey, blogging is dead. Blogs are completely dead. Websites are dead.
Right.
And now, like you just said, I remember hearing, the word newsletter, that was a laughable thing 5 years ago. Yep. And now everybody's starting to be like, man, maybe we need to put a newsletter together. Maybe we need to put a blog together, or,
No, so it's just clear, Tyler, I was the front ranks of people who was so condescending about newsletters. I literally, when we were at 35 million, whatever, our peak, we literally, I was like, forget newsletters. Who cares? My line was, who wants more emails in your inbox? Anyone?
Sure.
And no one ever raised it. And if we had been pushing it then, we have 400,000 subscribers now on our newsletter, which is great, but it's much smaller than it could have been. So, I really talk about basically like do things that you can control to some extent. So I admire that you don't worry. And I admire further that you're excited. And I think, for Elephant's part, like Jennifer said, time for new platform. For 5 years, we've been investing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at Elephant. And we're a small business, so that's a lot of money for us in building a new platform, which we call the ecosystem, which should be like Threadless. If you know Threadless, it should be able to pay, thousands of writers a month. And we're already, we pay 15 right now, but the idea, which we haven't hooked up yet, is that readers will be able to directly contribute to writers. And our algorithm, I think algorithms aren't bad. I think algorithms make sense, but I think they're motivated usually by investors and boards and quarterly returns, not by mission. And our mission, we're independent. So I'm a writer. So I want thousands and thousands. I want 100,000 writers to be able to be somewhat mission driven, be somewhat guided by editors to make sure there's not too much narcissism or what do you call it? Magical thinking. But but to be able to make a living, at least a part-time living.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that is the dream. Like, I would love to just get paid to continue creating art. I would love that. And I think that is what's disheartening about that greed focused algorithm, is that I don't think anybody on that front ever stopped to look and think about what was going to happen to people who spent years developing these communities. I mean, it's catastrophically affecting people. And I feel lucky that the other half of my job is as a photographer, and thank goodness for that, because if all I relied on was money from book sales and, from writing on a daily basis, I'd be out on the street already. Really? I'm surprised. Honestly, yeah. Wow. And part of that, though, like full disclosure, is it's my own fault, because I am just absolute garbage at self-promotion. And I mean, people who, I don't know. In fact, I got an email the other day, someone asking me if I had a price sheet to do promoted posts. And I had no idea how to answer that question. And I said, I think I do. And I immediately went to Google and I was like, how much do you charge for a promoted post? And luckily it was a company that I actually enjoy. I agree with what they're doing and I like their stuff, but I didn't know what to say to them. And so, there's all these articles and it's like, oh, you ask for $100 for every 10,000 followers, and so I was looking at it and I was like, well, shit, I have to charge them $3,600 for a post then. And no one's, who's going to pay me that? And so I'm so bad at monetizing myself. I don't know. I mean, honestly, this is a conversation we should have later, because I have no idea how to monetize the following or the people who care, because I've never seen them as a following and I've never seen them as a cash cow. It's always just been, these are people that have chosen to follow the things that I'm saying today. That's it. Yeah. I mean, if I were your buddy or your colleague, I would say two things. One is I say your attitude is exactly perfect, and your attitude actually will encourage loyalty and encourage sales because you're genuine. Sure. And you should never feel like you have to change that 1%. And in fact, you're like an oasis of craft or integrity, and we should be going to that oasis, not going the other direction. Number two, I would say, like, don't change that. That would be so good. Number two, I would say the opposite, which is you should be shameless. And I think you are, I hope, about sharing what you love, because it's what you love. It's who you are. And you absolutely. Like, here's how you get my book. Here's a quote from my book. Here's how you get my book. Here's a quote from the book. Here's how you get my book. Here's how you get my book. Yeah. Link. And the link should be super easy. Like, Tyler Knott Gregson /book or whatever. So that, and just
That's what I've done with my book. And I've only had one book, and we did independent publishing. So I made 95% of the money instead of 5% or 10%. But the difference is I'm not in Target. I'm not in bookstores. I have to ship my own books, but then we can do eco shipping, which is super cool. No plastic.
That is cool.
Yeah. But, and we put little hearts on the packages. It can be personal, more like your stuff.
Yeah.
But so
that's a conversation we need to have later.
It's a huge trade-off, but it's one has worked out. And financially, from my one book, we've made well over $500,000, and that goes to Elephant, sadly.
Yeah.
But also the shipping's paid for by Elephant, all that stuff. The staff is partially paid for by Elephant. It's a very different model. We're more of a publishing person. But the only reason I'm saying that is because I think the more concrete we are about stuff, the more it's helpful for people. And I'm sure you can make far more with a big publisher like Penguin if they're doing good marketing and sending you on a book tour. And the problem is so many times, unless you're a star, which I think you qualify, publishers will not market much because they're so weak and buy Amazon. So I beg you, you can buy Tyler on Amazon, but don't buy anyone else on Amazon. Amazon is awful for climate change. It's awful for publishers, and it's mixed for authors. But long term, I think it's like making a treaty with, a conquering force.
Yes.
And I just read a stat that is something like 50 cargo ships in the world transporting these containers when we click something on Amazon Prime and we want it the next day. 50 of those cargo ships equal all the cars on the earth, carbon footprint wise.
Good Lord.
So every time you're clicking.
That's terrifying. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump down into the questions and we'll have a little question. Okay. So a question, which I think you've kind of answered, but maybe you could address it more. How have you built your followers on Instagram? I feel like you kind of said you didn't, you just were consistent. And Judy sees Barack Obama among them.
Oh, in fairness, I think Barack Obama probably follows like 700,000 people. So I'm one of the 700,000 people, but maybe something I said made a splash. I go after Trump quite a bit, so there might be something in that.
Well, that's interesting. You go after Trump in your poetry?
I have before, certainly. And I think Twitter is usually like my more pointed barbs, just because it's easier. I don't think Donald Trump's probably read very much poetry. And so, the stuff that I've written in that world probably gets forgotten, but I don't know. My fiance makes fun of me because sometimes I sink to very low levels and I get playground a little bit on Twitter with Donald Trump. I just can't help myself. And I don't know, as far as Buddhism goes, that's probably the least Buddhist thing I do on a weekly or monthly basis. But I don't know, man. Sometimes with bullies, you just have to stand up to bullies. You can't just, and that's again, the least Buddhist thing in me is that thought process, but
I don't know.
Perfect.
What is Buddhism? Like when the Chinese invaded Tibet, 90% of the Buddhists, either tried to escape or were just subjugated, raped, looted, genocide, awful. Their libraries were sacked and they peed on the books. But then
I've always thought that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just gonna say the intent. I always just thought the intent behind your action kind of overrides the action itself. And
well said.
And like you were saying too, because I've always related back to when China came after Tibet, and some people did have to stand up and fight, and their intent wasn't to murder. Their intent was to protect. And there's a massive divide between those two intents. And I mean, it's funny. I read an article once about the Dalai Lama being asked about vegetarianism and someone asked him, well, have you ever had meat? And he said he tries not to, and he almost never does. And he, before he has out of politeness. But they asked him, and he said, well, technically, when you eat any food, you're taking the life of that the life force and you're using it to fuel your own. It's the intent behind the action, you know? And so, especially living in a state like Montana where people love to hunt, I see such a difference between people who are hunting to feed their families and people who are trophy hunting to stick something on their wall. And it's the same thing. I always think of myself when I go after Trump as someone who's hunting to feed his family rather than put something on my wall, because there is a difference between those intents.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm vegan and I respect, you know, what do you call it? Subsistence hunters who have respect for the animal they're killing far more than, with all respect to those of you who do this, go buy, you know, factory farm meat that's wrapped up in plastic and saran wrap and styrofoam, you know, at the grocery. Hunters at least feel what they're doing. And
exactly.
You know, like Joel Salatin, who I interviewed, said, you know, the animals have one good life, a very good life and one bad day, which I think is a charming but flippant way of, I still disagree. I still don't want to eat meat, but it's better than, I mean, factory farming is torture. Back to the subject. Yeah. So, but I love that. Yeah. The intent. And yeah. And I was going to say in Tibet, and you referred to it better than I could, but the Khampas, a very small band of sort of Tibetan cowboys, really tried to defend all these fleeing women, children, and men who, it was beautiful. Yeah, they got massacred. But do you ever feel too exposed? This is from Hope, when you share a piece that's really vulnerable?
Honestly, no. I think maybe, again, this is a cheat. I feel like all the things, I just blame them on my cheat, and that's the Asperger's and the being on the spectrum. I forget a lot to think about where the things go after they're out of my brain. And honestly, for me, it's always, you spoke about catharsis earlier. It's such a cathartic experience for me to just get it out, that once it's out, I'm done with that piece. And then I get to move on and I get to get rid of something else that's been cluttering up my mind. And so where it goes after that, I always feel like I kind of have no control over. I'm just kind of at the mercy of where it wants. It's like putting seeds in the wind, or, you know, strands of a prayer flag. After they go there, they're going somewhere new and they're going to do something else. Yeah. All I can do is make sure is what I'm putting out is true to me. So I never really feel exposed.
Well, let me raise you a difficulty on the exact same question that Hope asked, which is, because I get asked this a lot, and I don't have a totally good answer, although I have an answer, which is, I have a sweatshirt that says, "Be careful or you'll wind up in my novel," which is not just vulnerable for you. What if you write about your fiance or your family member or your friend, you have a difficult conversation or something, blah, 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 and you catharsis that?
That happens actually quite a bit. But what's interesting is, again, there's this strange feeling of isolation that takes place living where we do. I would say 99% of the time, and I can't speak for Sarah, but we don't see the effect until we are, you know, either shooting a wedding of somebody who happens to read what I do, or we're traveling to a book signing. Like, we forget that people even care. And then we go to a book signing and there's a 3-hour line, you know, after the signing's over, of people who want to hug and share their stories. But until we go there, we don't know that. And there's a really weird difference for us. And it honestly is like there's two different lives going on. There's the Montana life where we are, I mean, if I could show you later, I live my backyard is 300 miles of forest. I mean, you could walk for 300 miles and not hit a house. Wow. And then my front of my yard, the city is all out in front of my yard. I kind of live up on a mountain, and it's not even often that I go down into town, but when I do, nobody here cares. No one knows what I do, literally no one. And so there's this weird isolation that happens. And then when we go travel, which we do a lot, we run into people at airports or wherever, and they start saying, "Oh my gosh, this that you posted and that." And it's really flabbergasting. And Sarah and I look at each other and we're both like, weird. And it still happens, even though this has been going on for like 8 years or 9 years. It just still is baffling.
So, let me, that's another natural segue to something I'm obsessed about, but also don't have a good answer on, which is, I'm deeply uncomfortable, perhaps with my Buddhist upbringing, about the rabid, in my view, and I'm going to offend a lot of people, rabid narcissism that I see on Instagram. I look at your feed and I just scrolled through pretty far. I didn't see what you looked like. What is your relationship with yourself, with your poetry, with your celebrity? I've kind of asked about that, but with your good old face.
I just bore the hell out of myself. And so like all the photos I post of me, someone made fun of me the other day. They said, did you know that 99% of the photos that have you in it, you're just like a silhouette way off in the distance? And I was like, yeah, that probably makes sense. And then, you know, we spoke about my friend Gregory. He makes fun of me too, because the other day we were talking about how hard it is to make a living as an independent artist. And I was like, well, if you ever have any tips, you know, let me know. And he knows that I love to work out and I work out a lot. And he literally said, he's like, well, you're an idiot. If you just posted a few shirtless photos, your following would quadruple. And I was like, yeah, if things get real desperate, maybe, you know, maybe it'll just turn into like me working out in the gym or something.
Right. So, yeah. So if we start seeing shirtless photos, we know things are bad.
Yeah. If you see me half naked on my own Instagram, it means that like either someone got really sick and my insurance sucks, or booked sales are just plummeting.
Right. Or the algorithm got really tight.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm sick of Instagram. So here's my stomach.
Yeah. Well, we know what to post for next April Fool's Day on Elephant.
There you go.
Yeah. Jen Schwartz, who works with the Academy, has a pretty funny comment there. You see that?
Oh my gosh. A haiku about my guns. Sun's out, guns out.
A haiku about my guns. All right. More questions.
Which ways?
Hey, Tyler. Yeah, exactly. Well, here I got some catharsis for you. Hey, Tyler, I'm looking for homes for some poetry and fiction short stories, and I'm curious about sites like Medium. Do you have experience with them? Do you know of other places where people can be paid Elephant for fiction writing? Also, since you share your work on Instagram, have you run into trouble with your work now being considered previously published?
That's interesting. Not really. The way that my publishing goes with Penguin is they kind of know that the way I go is whenever a new book comes out, I don't publish a ton of stuff, just save it for them. But then also they actually kind of enjoy when there is stuff that has been posted, because I don't know, it's kind of like it becomes a little bit of a greatest hits, and people get to revisit things that moved them in the past. So it's kind of fun creating books because I get to write a whole bunch of new stuff that the only way to see it is in the book. But then I also get to revisit and pick ones that maybe meant a lot to me, but maybe didn't get a lot of traction or a lot of eyes on it because it was longer. And so it becomes a greatest hits for me. Yeah. But no, I haven't run into that.
The cool thing about a book, the cool thing about a book, it's like an album. It's like a collection. You can have songs that aren't huge hits in there, right?
Exactly. That's my favorite part about it. Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying.
No, I just haven't really run into that. And as far as being paid to write, maybe that should become the step before I start posting shirtless photos. I've never had to do that before, but maybe, I got my start as a freelance writer, just writing copyright for blogs for, everything from like fitness companies to medical imaging devices to sex toys to all sorts of stuff. I worked for this company where it just outsourced copywriting for blogs for different companies all around the world. And so, I would wake up and I would write like 300 words on golf and then 200 words on MRI machines. And then, and so other than that, I think, like you said, people that are here right now are in the right spot to submit fiction for financial gain. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. This is off topic, but anyone who has a real following, we have a lot of sort of a VIP strata on Elephant where we don't treat them any differently. We're actually proud about that. We treat all writers equally, but if they have a following, we give them a link, and one editor particularly takes care of them, and Naomi, and With your following, you could put up every single thing you would put up, you would win $100 to $300, and it would just, you'd have just as many clicks and likes and stuff as Instagram. So you should experiment with it. And anyone out there who puts up a following of 300, whatever you have, 60.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep with the questions. So yeah, the previously published thing, you answered that. I love that question. The way I marketed my book is I'm not, even though I'm all about being shameless about what you love, I just shared quotes of the book, and people relate to the quotes. They're like little poems.
Oh, sure.
And then if they want more, then they buy the book. And that's just what I've done for years. And it kind of doesn't get old. People just relate to it.
Absolutely.
And Jennifer, yeah, we would totally publish fiction. Again, like poetry, our only requirement would be that it would be accessible, and it would have to be somewhat mission connected. If it was about like killing zombies or something, I don't, there could be a there that could totally have a good moral to the story, but yeah. Okay, questions.
In a second, I have to go flip a breaker. We had a power outage, and so the outlet that my computer, is that all right? Do you mind if I take 2 seconds?
Yeah, I'll just talk about zombie erotica for a second.
All right, I'll be right back.
You bet. That's a very Montana commercial. I'm gonna go cut some wood with my guns, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I gotta scare a bear off real quickly. Okay, I'll address Molly's question. Waylon was pretty particular and wanted control over many aspects of the design of his book. How much of Tyler's books has he been able to have a say in the design or the format? I always wonder this with poetry books. Yeah, so I'll tell people a brief story, which is I met with a publisher that I actually worked for. Yeah, go take a pee break if you need it, but be quick. Don't clean up, if you make a mess. That was gross. So I met with a publisher, and literally I told her the title, and she said, no, that's not going to work. We're going to do this. And I was like, told her about what I wanted for the design. She was like, no, I would probably do that. Like, that's not your business. And I literally remember being like, this isn't your book. And that was it. That was the end of the meeting. Short meeting. Are you a control freak? Do you have a healthy sense of ego? Independent publishing is for you. Good? All right, next question. But no, I'll ask Tyler that. Do you agree with the folks who say that societally we're losing our attention span at the hands of social media? Anyway, that's a long question. I don't have time for that. Is that what contributes to the success of the shorter posts? Jen, great question. All these questions are by Academy staff. Do we have more? Get more questions in there and vote them up. Is Tyler back? I'm blocking your image. There we go. Get more questions in there, folks.
All right, I think we're good.
Awesome.
That's a Montana thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I said while you're gone. I'm just going to cut some wood real quick, scare a bear off, and I'll be right back.
We've had a mountain lion prowling around our backyard the last few weeks, and so I've had to keep my dog in longer.
Yeah, that's how Boulder is. Yeah, that's how Boulder is. I'm glad I don't live right by the mountains. Okay, so there's a good question from Molly here. Waylon was pretty particular and wanted control over many aspects of the design of his book. How much of your books have you been able to have a say in the design or the format? I always wonder this with poetry books. How is that relationship control-wise?
Yeah, honestly, that's been the area that I've been the most blown away with and the most happy with for going with Penguin. The first book was just an experiment. So with the first book, we did select more like high performing poetry that people had shown and gravitated towards, just because it was such an experiment. I mean, At that point, I don't even remember really the last mass marketed poetry book at that point. I mean, it was like poetry was such a small press, and it was dwindling, and no one was publishing it. It was like a curse word in the publishing world. And so for them to take that risk with it was huge. And so they wanted a little bit of protection. But since then, honestly, they have absolutely blown me away. They've let me pick all the work that I want in the books. They've let me pick, which photographs, the layout, the design, to the point where I've had to actually defer to them and just say, I don't know what order to put these in. You guys storyboard it out however you think it flows best. But as far as like the design process, they've been absolutely amazing. I mean, they even let my friend Eva on the Wildly Into the Dark book, they let her do the hand lettering. And I mean, they've just been remarkable. And I've been kind of blown away by that.
So a little commercial break. Tell us about your latest book.
Sure. It's called Miracle in the Mundane. And it was kind of born out of my fiance and I were driving up to up past Calgary, which is about a 7.5 hour drive, about 2.5 years ago. And we had this idea. We thought it might be fun to teach an online class. I get a lot of the same questions asked at book signings and stuff. What if we tried it? And so on the drive, we came up with these ideas about, rather than teaching a writing course, maybe making it more of like a life reboot course. And that became the first class, and we called it Miracle in the Mundane. And I think 300 people signed up for it. And it honestly, it blew our minds how amazing it went. And it became this community to the point where there's people that are getting married that were in the class together. There's people that are dating now. There's people that have moved across the world to be together. And it really it rebooted their lives to the point where it changed their lives. And we saw such success with that. And it moved us so much that I actually pitched the idea to Penguin. I said, what if this was my next book? What if I made a course out of this, but then expounded on it and went further? And they liked it. And so this new book it's snippets of that course, but then it goes even further. And it's kind of just a way to retrain your brain and your life to be more mindful and to see more miracles in the mundane and the ordinary and the overlooked. And that's really what it is. And and we're actually getting ready we're going to do a second round of that course, I think May 1st. And so it's just, it's really neat what it's done and how it's felt.
Huh. Well, yeah, we'd love to support that. So let's talk about that afterward. It sounds like you don't need it. Sounds awesome.
Oh, I definitely do. I mean, all the help I can get. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, who does? So in Zen, they say don't know mind is the state of mind you want to rest in, but you have to get comfortable and confident in that.
Exactly.
And then Trungpa Rinpoche, one of his favorite phrases after this is over, you should Google Trungpa ordinary magic, which sounds like an exact translation of Miracle in the Mundane.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, and we can buy that book. Where's best to buy that book?
Your small indie little bookstores, I would think. They need help. Like you said, they need a lot more help than Amazon or Target or I think it's everywhere though. I think it's been popping up in interesting and strange places that I've seen pictures from. I don't even usually know where it is, but I do know it's at probably at your local bookstores. If not, they can definitely get it. So I would say support your indies first.
Great answer. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you would say your website also would be just directly from you. You can buy it, right?
I don't have that capability. I mean, people have been asking me to make t-shirts. Yeah, right. I don't even know how to sell t-shirts because I'm like, well, I don't want to have 400 size larges that are just sitting in my garage. So what do I do? I'm crap at all this.
Well, that is what happens. So that's not you being crap at it. Like we sell all kinds of things. Mugs and whatever. Anyway, and that is what happens. Sure. Okay, more questions. I encourage a few more questions. Let's jump in there. I'm going to skip a couple. Okay, Sarah, how were you able to find your voice and what is your creative process? I'm just getting into photography and wondering how I can connect through photos the way you talked about through writing.
That's actually awesome this is a photographer and a writer, I feel like I need both of them because I probably, this is like I've said it 1,000 times, but it's the only way I know how to say it. I always feel like whatever I can't say with words, I use images, and whatever I can't get an image of, then I use words. And so those two for me finish each other off, and they're intrinsically linked together. And so I always think that I do the same thing with my photography that I do with my writing. And my goal is always either to take a really big thing and make it feel small, or to take a really small thing and make it feel big. And so, you know, when I shoot a wedding, it's kind of interesting because on a photography front, I shoot with a zoom lens, and my fiance, Sarah, she shoots with a wide angle lens. And so her job is to, you know, find the big epic pictures with the sprawling landscapes and stuff. I have this giant zoom lens, and I usually leave that on almost the whole day. And so my job is to, rather than telling the story through these broad sweeping epics, I have to tell their story through like blink and you'll miss them little tiny moments. And it can be hands on hands or lace and fingers or whatever. And so that would be my advice. It would be, you know, whether you're using words or images, make big things feel little and make little things feel big, because that's where the story is for me.
You also talked about the punch in the gut, the kind of catharsis. How do you, I mean, in a way, there's no how there. You just talk about what's going on in a direct way, and that magic happens, that kind of alchemy happens where you're relieved of a lot of people keep that for their journals. I think some of us who like to write in that cathartic way just put it out there. And I think you can even write about your hesitation about putting it out there, and that can be catharsis.
For sure. In fact, I've always thought of my typewriter series, the whole series, which it's almost at 2,600 poems now. To me, all it is a journal. And it's funny, when I look back over all of them, it reads to me like a journal. I mean, if you go back through like from 400 to 900, that's like 500 poems. They're very heavy and they're very sad because I was going through a really hard time. And it's so fascinating to me to track backwards and look. And because they're mine, they feel like a journal. And I think if anybody were to one day publish the whole typewriter series, it would read like a story arc. It would have a journal, and I don't know. I think you hit the nail on the head there with the catharsis of the journal, because that's all this has felt like to me, is just a big long journal.
So tell people about, I alluded to it before, but that consistency, that typewriter journal, what is your daily craft?
So my day kind of, they can be the same every day because it just kind of runs into each other. But basically when I wake up, I post one of my photographs. And so that's a photograph that I have just finished taking or editing or whatever. And then my favorite part of that is coming up with the caption. And I always have the rule with myself, it has to be stream of conscious, and it has to be on the spot, and it has to be whatever first comes to my brain when I look at that picture. And so I post the photo that I take, and then whatever story or whatever line is told through that, it all goes from there. And then that process starts over at about noon when I do my daily haiku, which I think I'm at over 10 years in a row without ever missing a single day on that. And which is just weird. But that's another, it's like, basically that's my crossword puzzle for the morning is, all right, now I got to tell a story on some variation of love, whether that's romantic or whatever form of love, but it has to relate back to that. And so that's my like lunchtime, crossword puzzle. And then sometimes we do travel a ton. And so sometimes I have to type, scan, because I pride myself on every typewriter series poem I post. It's been typed on a real typewriter. I scan it on my old fashioned scanner, it's like a 1997 scanner. And then I prepare it, and then I send it to my phone and stuff so I can post it. And so sometimes when we're gone for extended periods, I have to advance scan a bunch of them. But I make sure that every time I post a poem, I write one that day as well. So I'm writing every single day. And so 3 times a day I'm writing, whether it's the story in the caption, the haiku, and then some form of a typewriter poem every single day.
So we teach a fair amount in the writing course about writer's block. I'm sure that's a question you get, given that you're the Lou Gehrig of haiku. How do you relate to that?
I've never had it. And so I always feel like I'm a big asshole when people ask about writer's block, but honestly, I've never had it. And I think that's also part of why Miracle in the Mundane came. And that's why the course that it came from, because that was the biggest question that I'd been asked. People said, how do you never run out of things to be inspired by? How do you keep writing every single day? How do you keep writing? And the answer was, if you're astounded by everything, and if you walk around in this constant state of amazement, you're always inspired. There's literally no excuse for not creating when you walk around in that state. And it's that state of amazement is possible. And it's not, I hate to say this because for some people it might not be easy, but it's easy once you start looking at things different. And if you just make a few subtle shifts, those dominoes fall, and you literally walk around in this constant state of everything becomes a source of poetry, and everything becomes a source of, photographic inspiration.
Well said. Yeah. So I did a video, and I do a little bit of a class on writer's block. And I basically say writer's block is a great, great thing to happen. I also don't go through it. It's a great thing to happen because it's telling you you're on the wrong path. And the usual question around writer's block is, how do I get through it? You're being so aggressive. Like, why would you want to get through writer's block? Writer's block is like someone standing up and you're passing, you're going the wrong direction. You're like, how do I get through this person helping me?
Yeah. Why would you want to continue down that road?
Yeah. So just listen to writer's block and relax. And from a Buddhist point of view or a human point of view, like you were saying about Miracle in the Mundane, if you're coming out of your fundamental, basic, ordinary magic goodness, it's just natural. It's not something that you're coming up with. Like, you're not coming up with a cool idea like Game of Thrones, you're just writing what is, whether it's your experience or a flower.
Yeah. Doesn't really matter. Fact, there's a chapter in the new book, and it's called The Conduit, Not the Conductor. And that honestly is like, if I were to offer one little tidbit of a help to somebody that's struggling, it's that fact. I think we go through life trying to conduct our environment and conduct our experience. And, we think that we can stand on this box and wave these things around, and the right amount of whatever will come our way, the right job, the right anything. You can't do that. And so the minute you stop doing that, and instead of even when it comes to writing a single poem, if you stop trying to conduct your brain and you just let it become a conduit and let the things that you're naturally experiencing pass through you, there's no block. Then it's just, you're an open vessel for whatever the universe is throwing at you. You're that vessel that just, it takes it from your brain to a piece of paper or to an image or whatever.
I love that. Please make that a quote, whoever's listening. Like, that's literally what all great poems, all great teachers, everyone always says it. Oh, it just or a sports person, if they have a great game, it just flowed through me. And it's also not, I don't have a problem with the conductor as long as they stop trying to conduct. It's also just like your basic goodness. You're part of it all. So stop trying to like there's this climber, Chris Sharma. I don't know if you know him, but he studied Buddhism. And for years, he was like the only climber who wasn't trying to I love heavy metal once in a while. Sure, no disrespect, but he wasn't trying to rage and then conquer the rock. He was like, I want to make love to the rock. I want to he was kind of a groovy dude. He was like a groovy surfer guy. And he was the best on the planet. And he didn't have a better physique than many other climbers. He just he listened to it, and he danced with it. And so we don't have to be so heavy and patriarchal, frankly, aggressive. So let me do one more question. You okay for time?
I'm great. Yeah, whatever you need.
Didn't know if you had a mountain lion situation or.
Well, that's a distinct possibility, but.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so you kind of already discussed this, but from Sarah, I love this question. Tyler's feed is really beautiful and consistent. When you look at his grid, it is photo, typed poem, written poem. What do you use to plan your posts? How do you feel this format is working for you? So I want to highlight that last sentence because you've covered a lot of that. How do you feel like that format works for you?
It's funny. I didn't even know that you could see the whole layout until somebody said something to me. They're like, oh, the aesthetic of your feed is really pretty. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like when you scroll, I see everybody's posts, and I didn't realize they meant like on my actual profile that it's set up in a certain manner. I never planned that. I post in the morning and in the afternoon and in the night, and it's just always been what I do. And again, that's probably partially where I am on the spectrum, that like that timing needs to be consistent for me. And so I never thought about the aesthetics of the feed or the way I'm laying it out or anything. I don't know if it's working for me. It's just always been what I do. And honestly, like that usually comes out of just out of necessity, because I'm usually eating lunch. Yeah, that I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I wonder if it looks like that. Does it only look like that certain times of day? Like when I post my next one, will it be screwed up, or will it always look like that?
Well, it's not screwed up, but it shuffles. So it's in a different order. So your haiku would be first, and your photo would be first, and your,
Sure.
It'll just shuffle. So it always looks basically perfect.
Well, yeah, that was an accident, because I write haiku when I'm eating lunch at a table that's flat. So that's what it is.
Yeah, it looks a lot better than mine. So yeah, I guess I have I have such a mixed feeling about Instagram. I almost don't relate to it very, very well. I almost am a bad teacher on Instagram. So I was successful, and it was easy to grow Elephant. Elephant's pretty big on Instagram. Walk the Talk Show is my little video series and podcast. And then I have my personal account. My personal account is where I have all the conflict. I love sharing Buddhist quotes. I love sharing my book. Other than that, other than putting up photos of like my dog or something, or environmental stuff, or what's compostable, or, ranting about plastic, I really don't, or Trump once in a while, I don't care. I really don't care about Instagram. And I think that comes through. So I'm so conflicted. So it's been really re-inspiring to talk with someone who's doing it in a not tacky way, in a meaningful way, in a helpful way for other people, and a way that fuels your career. So it's actually practical. And I'll just see if there's a last question. If not, we can just.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we might be good. Well, Tyler, it's great to finally connect.
You as well.
Yeah, and anything we can do together, I know, we'd love to support anything we can. And yeah, you're a good man.
Well, so are you. I honestly appreciate this, and everybody who dropped in and who asked questions and stuff, I appreciate it.
Yeah, everyone say how you enjoyed today. Be brutally honest, and we can all take it. Yeah, exactly. Run out and get his book if you're so inspired. Do his course if you're so inspired. Not if you're not. And Tyler is so great. We'd love to have you back. Would you be willing to come back ever?
Anytime you want, honestly.
Okay, I promise to try and come up with totally different questions every time.
Well, if not, whatever. As long as we just get to chat, I'm into it.
Awesome. Thank you, man. So there's some comments for you there on the right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Love everybody over there. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, let's all take a good posture and with respect and friendliness to Tyler. And if whoever's controlling this feed, you can leave the comments up a bit so we can read them. Let's all bow to Tyler. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, man.
Have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. All right. Sounds great. Thank you.